From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. Demonstrators in Sudan have gathered for their second day of a two-day protest to push for a civilian government. Hundreds of Sudanese protesters assembled outside the central bank in Khartoum for a general strike in a bid to stir up pressure for the ruling military council to hand power to a civilian administration. Protesters held the first day of a strike on Tuesday as tensions mount with the country's military rulers over the transition to democracy. Talks between the military council and the Freedom and Change forces are at a standstill despite weeks of negotiations.
Currently, and among the goals of the strike, is to have the military council hand over power to 100% civilian government in order to re-establish governmental branches and state structures, as well as reform the structure of banks, God willing.
Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez has hailed the diplomatic relations between his country and China. In a message posted on his Twitter account after meeting his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi, Rodriguez said the two countries will continue to improve their relations as they prepare to mark 60-year anniversary of their diplomatic ties. Rodriguez has also met with Yang Yiche, a member of the Communist Party of China's Political Bureau. The two leaders pledged to continue working to defend multilateralism and to reject the use of unilateral coercive measures. In Venezuela, President Nicolás Maduro is offering praises to staff at the local committees for supply and production, also known as CLAP, for their dedication to ensuring the delivery of food to 6 million Venezuelans. President Maduro expressed his gratitude via Twitter on Tuesday. He also called on the workers to show the world that no one could stop the organization. Meanwhile, the president visited the largest CLAP packing center in Venezuela, where the crowd was entertained by salsa music. He said joy and work are fundamental keys to defeating hatred and working towards prosperity. Representatives from the Venezuelan government have returned to Norway to continue talks with the opposition. The meetings seek to preserve peace and the well-being of Venezuelans, despite the attempts by the U.S. government of destabilizing the nation.
The Venezuelan government has long maintained its willingness to have talks with the opposition to resolve the political situation in the country, as it fights for the country's sovereignty and against the financial blockade imposed by the White House. Venezuelan citizens support President Nicolás Maduro's attempts at maintaining these talks, although some areas of the opposition do not respect them.
We have lost track of how many times President Maduro has offered to hold talks to resolve their problems. We have to understand that the Bolivarian Revolution happened within a democratic system. It was something given to us by Chavez, and using weapons to fix issues with the enemy was never part of the plan.
Since January 2019, foreign threats against Venezuela have not stopped, but neither has the support for the Bolivarian Revolution. Every day, citizens tell us how dialogue would benefit Venezuelan politics.
Dialogue is a process of not intervention. It means meeting halfway, because despite any differences, there's always a point where they can meet each other, a point to maintain the well-being of Venezuelan citizens who want peace.
While the Venezuelan and international right wing carry out an agenda to undermine President Nicolás Maduro and to stage a successful coup, the Venezuelan government continues insisting on having a dialogue with the opposition.
We see the contrast between us and those who support the opposition in war. Sabotaging the dialogue is to bet for war. The U.S. government benefits from it. They see war as a business. Here in Venezuela, we talk the language of all people. We talk the language of peace.
The stage has been set for another meeting in Oslo, the Norwegian capital. On May 17, Norwegian authorities confirmed their roles as mediators in political talks between the Venezuelan government and the opposition. Norway, which is not part of the European Union, does not recognize opposition figure Juan Guaidó as self-proclaimed interim president and has kept its support for peace.
During the first UN Habitat Assembly in Nairobi, Kenya, the United Nations has recognized Venezuela as a leader in housing rights. UN authorities said the Bolivarian government's Venezuela housing mission is an example to be followed by all nations. Over 3,000 delegates are attending the 5-day event to discuss the adoption of new global norms and policies to guide how cities and communities are planned, managed, and governed. Venezuela has taken up the temporary presidency of the United Nations Commission on Disarmament. Ambassador Jorge Valero accepted the position at a meeting of the Commission in Geneva. He said Venezuela would use its presidency to address the alarming nuclear threat that hangs over the world. He lamented that the United States has isolated itself by having its delegation walk out of the session. Other diplomats also accused the U.S. of undermining the unilateral system.
Today, the anti-diplomatic and disrespectful gesture of abandoning the chamber was interpreted by most of the diplomats not only as a disrespectful act towards the presidency, but towards all the ambassadors and diplomats present. The representative of Donald Trump's government remains isolated. It was ridiculous what he did.
The issue of extrajudicial executions is back on the agenda in Colombia after a retired colonel was sentenced to 37 years in prison. Orlando Gomez was found guilty of the murder of 2 civilians back in 2006, who he then claimed were guerrillas killed in combat.
For the academic and analyst Boris Duarte, the story of extrajudicial killings in Colombia is not a closed book. He says it's a security policy that the government is implementing once again as it tries to undo the peace process.
They want to limit the demands of society and undermine the most important part of the peace agreements, which is the transitional justice carried out by the Special Jurisdiction for Peace, or JEP. And this, just as many soldiers are being called for questioning about extrajudicial executions.
A report by the Attorney General's office records 2,248 victims of extrajudicial killings between 1988 and 2014. It says 514 officers, 992 non-commissioned officers, and 133 civilians took part in these executions. So far, the JEP has summoned about 2,000 soldiers involved in these crimes against humanity.
Many of the victims' families see the JEP as an opportunity to find out who was really responsible for applying this policy, that tried to win the war at any cost. And this is important for the whole country. The JEP needs to be able to continue its work.
Questions have been raised about the new military chiefs appointed by President Duque, most particularly in the case of General Nicasio Martinez, who was described by the New York Times as the architect of a new era of extrajudicial execution. On top of this comes the sentence of 37 years in prison for the retired Colonel Orlando Gomez.
The recent verdict against Colonel Gomez is one more proof that for the government, especially under President Álvaro Uribe, the crimes known as false positives, these extrajudicial killings, were a deliberate policy of the state.
The Committee in Support of Political Prisoners has sent a letter to the Senate committee to demand that the promotion of General Nicasio Martinez be blocked because there is evidence that he was involved in both corruption and extrajudicial executions when he commanded the 10th Brigade of the Army's 1st Division between 2004 and 2006.
We have more stories coming up. Don't go away.
Acompañamos a los pueblos que resisten en cada una de sus luchas.
Somos esa ventana que se abre para visibilizarlos entre fronteras.
Thursdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Mexican authorities have rescued 281 Central American asylum seekers in the state of Chiapas and arrested at least 10 human traffickers. The operation was carried out by the municipal police in the city of Comitán de Domínguez. Police confiscated 4 vehicles and 5 trucks that were used to transport the asylum seekers to the U.S. The National Institute of Migration transferred them to its local offices, where they met Guatemalan and El Salvadorian consular officials. Immigration authorities said 161 migrants come from Guatemala, while the rest are from Honduras and El Salvador. In other news, heavy rains have forced thousands of citizens to evacuate from their houses in Paraguay. Around 70,000 people living close to the Paraguayan River were displaced due to flooding. The rainfall started in mid-April and continues to cause damage across the country.
This is like the end of the world. We do not wish it for the richest nor the poorest. This is a disaster.
If more water comes, I'm not going to move anymore. I'm going to put my things on top of each other, right here. I don't think it will get that much higher.
In the southern regions of Peru, people are waiting the importation of natural gas from Bolivia to satisfy their needs at a cost-effective price. These communities do not have access to Peruvian natural gas since the government neoliberal policies were applied.
15 years ago, Peru and Bolivia signed an agreement for Bolivia to provide natural gas to the southern regions of Peru. To make this happen, Bolivia would invest $400 million for the construction of a pipeline. However, the governor of the Puno region said the project has repeatedly been postponed as a result of political interference.
People's needs should not be affected by political ideologies. The people of Puno City need gas. As such, we're going to continue making our plight to professional schools and politicians, so this project can commence in order for the industrial and agricultural revolution to begin.
Families living in the Puno region in southern Peru spend around $25 a month for local gas, while in Bolivia, natural gas per family does not exceed $2. For experts, the importation of Bolivian gas will reduce this gap and would allow the poorer families to access this fundamental resource.
The Bolivian gas would double Peruvian gas supplies and would give the energy sector the security it needs. Built with Bolivian investment, the pipeline could be deployed through the Altiplanic ending at the coast. The gas could satisfy the entire southern region.
The Peruvian government has been mum on the issue, although it was public knowledge that the last meeting between the presidents of Peru and Bolivia would include discussions on the importation of Bolivian gas. Former Energy Minister Carlos Herrera Descalzi said the project's delay is as a result of opposition from the business sector.
Peru has to take into account the interest of its citizens, the interest of the consumer. That is the first point of reference. The business owners have to compete with each other. I don't think they will suffer any losses, nor do I feel that the Bolivian gas coming to Peruvian territory will affect them negatively. Also, I don't believe it affects all the entrepreneurs.
Peru's need to import gas occurs although the country owns the Camisea gas project that produces around 500,000 billion cubic feet of natural gas per year. That gas is mainly exported by private companies that own and run the project.
In El Salvador, the trial of Evelyn Hernandez, who is accused of homicide for allegedly having an abortion, has been postponed. Initially, the trial was set to take place on June 6, but it has now been postponed to the 24th. In February 2019, Hernandez was released on parole after spending 3 years in jail. She was sentenced to 30 years in prison for homicide in 2017, but the Supreme Court canceled the sentence and ordered a new trial. On Friday, St. Lucia and Cuba signed a health cooperation agreement to extend the time of the Cuban Medical Brigade that is currently in the island. Cuba ambassador to St. Lucia, Alejandro Marin, says his country remains committed to developing the country's healthcare system.
The signing of the agreement is an important moment because it reflects the will of our governments to continue working together in such an important field like public health. By the means of this agreement, we are enhancing the ties of French cooperation between Cuba and St. Lucia, between our governments, between the Ministry of Health of Cuba and the Ministry of Health and Wellness of St. Lucia. We are very happy, we are proud to continue contributing from our humble capabilities to the development of St. Lucia.
St. Lucia's Health Minister Mary Isaac recognized Cuba's sterling support for the public health development.
We have accomplished great strides through the help of the Cuban Medical Brigade that exists here, especially our eye care program. That has gone a long way. We have a well-established eye care program, and that is through the Cuban assistance that we get from the Cuban government.
Jamaica's former Prime Minister Edward Seaga has died. Seaga passed away Tuesday on his 89th birthday in the United States, where he had been receiving treatment for cancer. He was the 5th Prime Minister of Jamaica, serving from 1980 to 1989, and was the leader of the Jamaica Labour Party up until 2005. The former Prime Minister is credited with building Jamaica's post-independence, cultural and financial sectors. Seaga was also the last surviving framer of Jamaica's constitution. Here's a taste of him speaking in his last election campaign in 2002.
For candidate selection that I have one firm belief that the best way to deal with corruption is to set the example at the top. When you set the example at the top, the water that flows from the top is pure and clean, and it will carry whatever dirt is in the way.
The Cayman Islands is stepping up its focus on human trafficking amid reports of a hidden sex trade on the islands. Police Commissioner Derek Barnes says there are signs of organized rings operating around the region that are smuggling people, especially sex workers, into the country. He therefore urges law enforcement agencies to watch out for the signs of people smuggling.
So the educational programs that we have, the training programs.
We continue with news. Chinese technology giant Huawei has filed new legal actions against the U.S. government to scrap President Donald Trump's ban. The company's chief legal officer, Song Liping, told in a news conference that Huawei was heading to court to halt what he called illegal actions against the company by the U.S. government. Song further accused Trump of using unproven allegations to put the Chinese giant out of business.
Just now, we filed a motion for summary judgment. By doing this, we hope that the court can issue a judgment in the fastest and most efficient way, declare restrictions on Huawei as unconstitutional, and stop enforcement of related sections.
We're taking one last break. Stay with us.
The life is full of moments. Moments of fight. Moments of hope. Moments that transcend. Moments that you can live in. Telesur Documentaries.
Sundays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Israeli authorities have scaled down Gaza's fishing zone to 10 nautical miles. A statement by the Ministry of Defense said the decision is in response to the launching of balloons fitted with firebombs from the Gaza Strip. The decision comes just a few days after the fishing zone was extended to 15 nautical miles. Under the Oslo Accords signed in 1993, Israel is obligated to allow fishing up to 20 nautical miles, but this has never been implemented. At least 7 people have died in Syria after government-led airstrikes hit the northwest. This comes hours after another 21 people were killed by airstrikes, which hit several towns in Idlib province. A hospital was also hit by artillery shells. The facility is reportedly out of service due to severe structural damage. The NGO Human Rights Watch is accusing Egyptian forces and militants of committing crimes against humanity. According to them, their government has been carrying out enforced disappearances, killings, torture, and other illegal acts. It says militants opposed to the government have kidnapped and tortured Sinai residents. In 2017, a massive explosion hit El Rauda Mosque, and armed men opened fire, killing more than 300 civilians. A prison riot in Ukraine has left 4 security guards injured. Inmates in a Ukrainian prison on Monday lit fire and took guards and nurses as hostages in a 4-hour standoff on Monday as they were protesting against poor living conditions. Police have said 4 prison guards were injured in these clashes with the inmates, and it took police and investigators 4 hours to enter the prison. The prisoners are said to have started the protest after guards began searching the cells for banned possessions such as drugs.
What provoked it? Prisoners were going to the dining room and there was not enough food for them. This is what provoked it. And they complained to the prosecutor's office. Authorities of the prison didn't like it and they decided to impose restrictions. The arson was a form of protest by prisoners because the authorities started to beat them and take everything away.
In Malawi, as he was sworn in on Tuesday, re-elected President Peter Mutharika urged the opposition to accept the results in this election, which was marred by fraud allegations. The 78-year-old, the leader of the ruling Democratic Progressive Party, was declared the victor on Monday after an injunction that was barring the release of the results, and this was lifted. However, opposition leaders have vowed to continue challenging the results in court. Thousands of supporters gather at a sports stadium in Malawi's commercial capital to watch him take the oath of office. It's been 2 months since Cyclone Idai caused damages in Mozambique, with survivors still struggling to rebuild their lives. Rural communities are trying to rehabilitate farmlands and reboot food production in a country where 80% of the population depends on agriculture. Our correspondent Andre Vieira went to see how the recovery is progressing. This is the first of his series of reports.
From overhead, it is still possible to see the damage caused in the city of Beira, in the Sofala province. On the evening of March 14th, Idai made landfall over the central region, producing torrential rains, floods and strong winds, which left about 600 people dead. It is an experience residents of Beira will never forget.
The storm made landfall at around 7 p.m. The wind speed rapidly intensified. Just 1 hour later, the storm's intensity grew. By 9 p.m., the roof of the bank was blown off. It just flew away, as if lifted by giant hands. Then the cyclone stuck. with deadly force.
The true scale of devastation and flooding still lingers in Beira's popular tourist area. We toured the city and the rickshaw driven by Armando José. He has seen the damage firsthand. That's because this city is his home. But he's become a statistic, one of the nearly 87,000 displaced. He now shares a 15 square meter flat with the rest of his family.
For me, being the only man in the house, it's difficult to start all over again. It's like starting all over from scratch without knowing how to.
Moving away from the coast and getting closer inland, you can see that roadways are still damaged and many people still live in shelters or improvised housing. About 180 miles away from Beira is Chibabuaba. The community heavily relies on agriculture for its survival. But the cyclone has destroyed roadways, homes, crops and their lives.
On that day, I was inside my house. Suddenly it came crashing down on me, and I had to run out. When I managed to get outside, I saw trees and corn crops obliterated. What's even worse is that after the storm was over, we all had to battle malaria and other illnesses.
The cyclones have deepened Mozambique's food crisis. Many farmers are left with nothing but hope.
If the rain comes, the first thing we're going to do is plant. That's the basis of agriculture, and that's the only way we can start afresh.
For this country that fought until 1975 for its independence from Portugal, new challenges arise after Idai. While the immediate future is concerning, the people of Mozambique are determined to rebuild their communities and reclaim their lives.
And we want to bring you a story that makes us all proud here at Telesur. We have won a National Journalism Prize in Mexico for our coverage of the migrant caravans last year. This was revealed by our president, Patricia Villegas, who noted that special mention was given to our correspondents who followed the mobilization. On Twitter, she said journalist Eduardo Martinez received the most important award, and Santiago Buton was also awarded for his work. Meanwhile, cameraman Victor Figueroa Beltrán, Juan Carlos Martínez Trejo and Rafael López Caballero were praised for their exclusive footage of the migrant mobilization from a helicopter over the Suchiate River in Guatemala. Here are the images that were honored by this award. And Venezuela's Vice President Delcy Rodriguez applauded the team via Twitter. She praised Telesur for broadcasting the truth to all corners of the planet. And also one of the first to congratulate Telesur on this accomplishment was Venezuela's Vice President of Communication, Jorge Rodriguez. He praised the women and men who fight for truth and life with the fierceness of love. We will always be reporting on the migrants across our territory, our continent. And with that, we end our news brief, but remember, you can find all of our stories in our website, telesurenglish.net. And you can also join us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.